and we should be finishing on time. What we're going to do now is move on to the crossfire section, and it seems like panelists already have several questions lined up for each other. So we're going to give them an opportunity to ask each other questions. It will be starting with Jonathan. He'll have a minute to ask Bashir a question. Bashir will have 2 minutes to respond, and then Jonathan can further comment on that for a minute. And then we'll take a question from Bashir in a similar manner. And there'll be 3 questions from each side. So I'm just going to move this mic so that we can operate everything from the tables here. We don't need to keep standing up. Ryan, you'll just assist me a little bit. So you know we're dealing with this technology, and batteries unfortunately don't last forever, so just give us 30 seconds here to just sort the timing out. Jonathan, your first question for Bashir. You got a minute to ask the question. Bashir, you have 2 minutes to respond. And Jonathan will get a further minute to comment on that response if you like.
Bashir, let me go to, for a second, Matthew 11:27, Luke 10:22. Jesus says, "All things have been given to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son wills to reveal him." That's another cue saying this common to both Matthew and Luke, but not found in Mark. In your view, is that compatible with the Islamic view of who God is and who Muhammad represents Jesus to be?
John chapter 16, verse 25, Jesus says, "I speak figuratively." In other words, you don't take everything I say literally. I say, Jesus didn't say that. I'm giving you an example. So-and-so has got a heart of stone. It doesn't mean his heart is made of stone. It simply means the man lacks compassion. So this is what Jesus says. He speaks figuratively. You don't take him literally. So, any phrase that you can quote, I can probably give you an alternative. I'm not telling you that I'm right. I'm saying all I need to do is give you an alternative interpretation. And if I give you an alternative interpretation, that should be sufficient. Simply to say that, look, Jesus could have meant that, but he could also have meant this. See, let me give you a practical example. When Lazarus passed on, Jesus comes to the house and he meets Martha there, the lady Martha. And Jesus says, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes this will live forever." Do you believe that, Martha? Martha says, "Yes, I believe that you are the Son of God. You are the Christ." And then she turns to her sister and says, "The teacher is here. The rabbi is here. Not God Almighty in human form." I mean, after all that exchange, that powerful exchange, she understood. He meant it metaphorically, not literally. Thank you.
Okay, John, Bashir, you done?
Yeah.
John, you can comment for a minute if you like.
Jesus, throughout the Gospels, uses the title Son of God not as a figurative expression, but as a literal expression to denote his self-identity. Matthew 11:27, Luke 10:22 is one example. You've also got Mark 13:32 and Matthew 24:36, where Jesus says, "No one knows the date of the hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father." So he thus presents himself and identifies himself as superior to every human and angelic being. Likewise, in Luke chapter 20, you have the parable of the wicked tenants, and the owner of the vineyard sends in his servants, and they are sent away empty-handed and cast out of the vineyard. Finally, he sends his son, saying, "This is my son. Surely they will listen to him." But they say, "Hey, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." And then they kill him. So Jesus thus identifies himself as the last of the prophets and the unique, special Son of God. So that would be my response. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Bashir, your first question for Jonathan.
Okay. Many Christians tend to criticize Muslims, and I think perhaps you've done so as well in the past, this concept of taqiyya. Now, taqiyya is a concept that is found in the Quran. It is based on an incident in which two parents and a young man was tortured to renounce their faith in the one true God. The parents managed to hold out. The young man broke under torture and he recanted his faith. And he felt terrible about it. And the revelation came down that said, look, you're not in jihad, you're not a soldier. Under those circumstances, if you blaspheme, God accepts that. Now, obviously, one has to, in a sense, not be a soldier in order to do that.
To get to your question.
Yes. If one looks at Acts chapter 21 verse 17, Paul is not a soldier. He's a believer. He comes there and he pretends to follow the law of Moses. Now this is not taqiyya. His life wasn't in danger. He wasn't being tortured. It is plain and simple hypocrisy.
Bashir,
My question would be,
Bashir, we have to ask the question now.
Yes, my question would be, do you accept Paul as a hypocrite or not, in this instance?
So the passage you're quoting is from Acts 21 verses 17. Let me just read the text for you.
Yes.
When we arrived at Jerusalem, the brothers received us warmly. The next day, Paul and the rest of us went to see James, and all the elders were present. Paul greeted them and reported in detail what God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. When they heard this, they praised God. Then they said to Paul, "You see, brother, how many thousands of Jews have believed, and all of them are zealous for the law. They have been informed that you teach all the Jews who live among the Gentiles to turn away from Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or live according to our customs. What should we do? They will certainly hear that you have come. So that what we tell you, there are 4 men with us who have made a vow. Take these men, join in their purification rites, and pay their expenses so that they can have their heads shaved. Then everybody will know there is no truth in these reports about you, but that you yourself are living in obedience to the law. So as for the Gentile believers, we have written to them our decision that they should abstain from food sacrificed to idols, from blood, and the meat of strangled animals, and from sexual immorality." The next day Paul took the men and purified himself along with them. Then he went to the temple to give notice of the date when the days of purification would end, and the offering would be made to each of them. So notice this is after the Jerusalem Council, when Paul has already indicated to the Gentile, when the James and Peter have already indicated to the Gentile believers that they are under no obligation to obey the ceremonial aspects of the Levitical law, such as circumcision and so forth. And is also after Peter has already received his visit from, he has this vision where he sees a carpet of animals come down, and God says, "Kill and eat." And so, no, I don't think Paul is a hypocrite. In fact, I think that Peter and James, according to the book of Acts, if you trust the chronology and you trust the history, that's the same message that they taught. Go to Acts 15, you go to Acts chapter 10 as well. Thank you.
Well, you heard the passage recited. It's quite obvious. Paul is told that he should follow the Mosaic law. He pretends to do that. Simple as that. As regards the so-called Council of Jerusalem and the Gentiles, that is nothing new. That was part of Jewish law. That look, as Jews, we follow the Mosaic law to the letter. You as Gentiles, non-Jews who come in, you are not the chosen people. So what we need from you is simply to believe in one God, not worship idols, not sacrifice food to idols, and do good. It's as simple as that. It was following the Mosaic law. Paul was saying that, look, what is good enough for the Gentiles should be good enough for the Jews. And that is the problem. No Jew accepted that, and they were totally against Paul. And James tried to tell Paul, listen, prove to them that you are a Jew in full, and Paul hypocritically pretends to do that. To me, that is hypocrisy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bashir. Just to clear up any confusion again, it's 1 minute to ask your question. So we'd like you to, if you're going to elaborate on the question, perhaps it's better if you first ask the question and then use the remainder of your minute to elaborate for both panelists. So that was one question from each speaker, and we'll have 3 such questions. So Jonathan, your second question for Bashir.
Bashir, can you give me your methodology by which you select which sayings of Jesus you consider to be authentic and which you disregard? Thank you.
Well, the Quran calls itself a criterion, and I would use the Quran as a criterion for any book that that claims to be from God. As regards Jesus, we accept that this is not the original scriptures of Jesus. Christians tell us that Jesus spoke Aramaic. These scriptures are in Greek. God revealed the Injil to Jesus. Jesus, peace be upon him, did not walk around with the Gospel of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and the letters of Paul, and nor did he read it out one by one. What he did was, he received revelation from God in Aramaic, and that is what he said to the people. We don't have that. So I'm quite prepared to put the sayings of Jesus on par with our hadith. In other words, it is a report, what Jesus said and did, and we can evaluate it from this perspective. Generally, I do not have a problem with any of the sayings of Jesus. I think what we're going to have a problem with is simply perhaps my interpretation versus perhaps Jonathan's. Thank you.
John, you have a minute if you like.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that Bashir here is being very selective in which sayings of Jesus he considers to be authentic. For example, he takes passages which seem to comport with Muhammad's theology, but he doesn't take passages which don't comport with Muhammad's theology and are in fact more consistent and compatible with Paul. Such as, for example, I quoted in Matthew 11 and Luke 7, where Jesus self-identifies as Yahweh from Malachi 3, or from Mark 14, where Jesus says, I am, speaking to the high priest, and you will see the Son of Man, self-identifying himself as the Son of Man from Daniel 7, seating at the right hand. You'll see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. He disregards that. He disregards the many sayings I gave where Jesus predicts his impending death and resurrection. To only select those which are consistent with the Quran is fundamentally circular, and that's the methodological problem.
Thank you. Bashir, your second question for John. You have
Yes.
1 minute.
Matthew chapter 13, verse 34, we are told that Jesus taught in parables. Jesus taught nothing except in parables. There isn't a single parable of Jesus where he talks about his divinity, his death, his resurrection. And yet Matthew chapter 13, verse 34 tells us that that is the one method that Jesus always employed. Can you give me a parable?
Sure. I can give you one example from Luke 20. I mentioned the parable of the wicked tenants who throughout the different servants who are sent to the vineyard, and finally the father says, here is my son, they will listen to him surely. And they say, look, here is the heir, come let us kill him and the inheritance will be ours. And so they cast him out of the vineyard, or rather they kill him and take the inheritance. And so Jesus self-identifies as the last and greatest of the prophets who is to be slain. In fact, multiple times he predicts his impending death and resurrection. And Jesus says to the Jews, a wicked and adulterous generation looks for a sign, but no sign will be given to her except the sign of Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a whale, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, which means Sheol, which means dead. So Jesus does communicate his death as well as his divine credentials in many different respects.
This is the only parable that I knew Jonathan was going to quote. Totally in error, Matthew chapter 21, verse 33, the quoting. Firstly, it is not, when the Father sends the Son, it is not the intention of the Father for the Son to die, firstly. Secondly, no resurrection is mentioned. The mode of death of the Son is not mentioned. The hay is mentioned. The hay means you inherit something. The power is not yours, you simply inherit. Again, we are told that the laborers wanted to take the inheritance of the Son. If the Son was God, are we actually saying that the laborers want to take godly power? No. Perhaps prophetic power, perhaps yes, but that parable has nothing to do with the death and the resurrection of Jesus. Thank you so much.
Jonathan, your final question for Bashir?
Can you give me your interpretation of the passages I cited concerning Jesus' predictions regarding his impending death and resurrection? I gave you, for example, John 2, 18 and 19. I gave an argument for the authenticity of that, where Jesus says, I'll destroy the temple, rebuild it in 3 days, or the sign of Jonah, or the manifold times where he says that the Son of Man is to be betrayed and handed over to the chief priests and be put to death and on the third day rise. Can you give me your interpretation of that and whether it's compatible with Muhammad? Thank you.
Jesus, we are told, predicts his death. Now here's the amazing thing. John chapter 20 verse 9, we are told the disciples of Jesus did not know that Jesus was going to be resurrected. How is it possible when he told everybody clearly that he was going to die? We have a problem. Simply talking about Jesus' prophecies is not good enough when there is a contradiction when we are told, as I said, in John chapter 20, verse 9, that the disciples did not know that Jesus was going to be resurrected. In fact, Luke chapter 24, verse 19, when the disciples hear of Jesus' death, what do they say? They said, "We are shocked that the man has died." Jesus was a prophet, great in word and in deed. The sign of Jonah. Jonah spent 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale. Was he dead or was he alive? He was alive. Jesus was supposed to have died. Another prophecy gone. I wanted to say to hell, but that would be blasphemous. So excuse me. So another prophecy incorrectly foretold. Jesus said about his body being a temple. Well, I mean, what does it mean? Does it mean that he died physically, spiritually? I mean, if one looks at chapter 16, book of Psalms, David says that when I die physically, God, you will resurrect me quickly so that I can be by your side enjoying the pleasures of heaven. So if Jesus forecasted that he will be resurrected quickly, like David, like every other prophet, enjoying heaven, I don't have a problem with that. I really don't. Thank you so much.
1 minute, John.
The sign of Jonah, for example, where Jesus says that just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The heart of the earth, again, to the Jew means Sheol, which means the place of the dead. So that's what Jonah. In any case, the point of comparison is not whether Jonah was alive or dead. The point of comparison is 3 days and 3 nights. Which is a synonym for on the third day, as we learn from Esther 4 and various other sayings of Jesus as well. John chapter 2, verses 18 and 19, is he talking about spiritual resurrection or bodily resurrection? It's clearly bodily, because he's talking about the temple as his body. He destroys the temple and then he raises it up again. He says in John chapter 10, "No one takes my life from me. I have authority to lay it down. I have authority to take it back up again." So Jesus numerous times predicts his death. As for in John chapter 20, and the disciples not understanding the scriptures, it says they still did not realize from scripture that God had to raise Jesus from the dead. Yes, because they had an accurate view of what Jesus meant when he talked about his resurrection. To the Jew, the Pharisees didn't believe in a general resurrection or a first fruits resurrection. They had a concept. Okay.
Bashir, your last question.
Jonathan, do you accept the fact that Jesus, peace be upon him, when he was on this earth, he followed the Mosaic law, and that Paul denied the Mosaic law? I think that is the heart of the question.
Paul argued that the ceremonial aspects of the Mosaic law had been fulfilled in the person of Christ. So Christ is the fulfillment of circumcision, and our new circumcision is regeneration. He taught that Christ is a fulfillment of the Sabbath. We now have our Sabbath rest in Christ. He taught that, so the ceremonial laws of Levitical, the Old Testament law, find their fulfillment in the work and person of our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, as to whether Jesus performed the requirements of the Mosaic law, such as circumcision and so forth, sure, because he was a Jew. And as a Jew, he went along with the Mosaic law. I don't see how this is a dilemma for Christianity.
Well, Paul said this, Paul said that. Indeed. My question is, what did Jesus say? He followed the Mosaic law, full stop. If Paul felt that eating pork is okay, that's up to Paul. Jesus didn't eat pork. Jesus followed the Mosaic law, Paul didn't. And that is the heart of the question. So we have a problem. Are you following Jesus or are you following Paul? And if you are following Paul, you need to ask yourself why you are going against the teachings and the practice of the Master. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That's our crossfire section completed. We're now going to move on to the audience participation. I can see a lot of eager faces. A lot of people want to ask questions. We're going to take a maximum of 4 questions to Jonathan and 4 questions to Bashir. But what we'd like you to do is, please, if you have questions for Bashir, please line up on this side so that you can face Bashir and it will be easier. And those who have questions for Jonathan, please line up there on the left. just somewhere around where that video camera is, so that you can